Are you folks enjoying Fed Forum? Yeah, that's it. That's more like it. All right, all right. You know, based on that reaction, it sounds like you folks are having a good time, but not necessarily a great time. We are going to change that. This panel is going to change that. This panel comprises of some of the most insightful and innovative thought leaders across the federal space. And this session, this is the last panel discussion of the day. They saved the best for last, obviously. But this panel discussion is what stands between you and all the fun stuff, right? The happy hours, the networking hour, the dinners, all that good stuff. So the five of us are going to do our best to make this as intriguing, as thought-provoking as possible, right? With that said, my name is Gaine Nazareth. I lead the solution consulting team that supports our DoD business here at ServiceNow. I'd love to hand it over to an esteemed and distinguished panel to introduce themselves.
Sure, I'll go first. My name's Alexis Bonnell. I am lucky enough to be the CIO of the Air Force Research Lab, serving both Air Force and Space Force. I'm also the head of our Digital Capabilities Directorate. I'm our AI liaison, and I'm also our AO. And so the terrifying part of this job is that really I don't get to point to anyone else if we can't pull something off. So that is me.
Dave Larrimore. I'm looking at the screen in front of me here, which is really cool, high-techy, by the way. That's a lot of words. So I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Department of Homeland Security. I am officially one of the responsible AI officials for the department, a privilege I share with the Office of Policy at DHS, and I predominantly support Eric Heisen, the Chief Information Officer, as well as the first Chief AI Officer for the Department of Homeland Security.
Oh.
Name is John Lau. I am the Senior Strategic IT Operations Advisor for the USPTO, and I support the OCIO and our CIO, Jamie Holcombs, and Debbie Stevens, our DCIO. And I am in charge of the enterprise roadmap for the USPTO. We did a lot of efforts in years past in bringing us into the cloud, using more capabilities across, and now we're looking to operationalize artificial intelligence across the board and get more capabilities in front of our staff, in front of our customers overall. Very excited to be here.
And my name is Catherine Manfre. I'm the Office of Personnel Management's Chief Transformation Officer, and I'm excited to be at a conference and on a panel that has the word transformation in it. I'm broadly responsible for OPM's overall transformation, which, among other things, includes customer experience and employee experience, and our agency data strategy. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you all for the introduction. My first question is to you, Alexis. And this is on everyone's mind, so I thought I'd kind of start off with it. And hopefully this will set the stage for the rest of the discussion. Alexis, have you been to the Taylor Swift concert?
I have to admit, you know, getting close to my 50s, I was not brave enough to brave it in person, but I have caught it online, feet up, popcorn, and able to fast forward. Yes.
Hopefully that will change, right? Hopefully you'll make it out there sometime. Now, switching to a more serious note, talking about Gen AI, experts say that in the future, we're going to have about 40% of the working hours that are going to be impacted by Gen AI. Mm-hmm. Do you see that applying across the federal government, particularly in the DoD, right? And how does that affect job satisfaction? How does it affect the impact on the mission and just national security in general?
Sure, absolutely. So when I think about AI, what I really think about, first of all, I wish it had been called augmented intelligence instead of artificial. I think, you know, had people really thought about the tool that it was to supplement and to complement, you know, what it is as our human knowledge base. But when I think about AI, I really look at it as just simply a new opportunity to have a relationship with knowledge at scale and speed. And part of why I think that matters right now is, you know, a lot of us have lived through the last 3 years, but we didn't really understood what shifted. And what I mean by that is, you know, really in the last 3 years, we went from, at least in a DoD horizon, from kind of a 5 to 15-year average change horizon to a 6 months to 1.2. And just take that into account, right? The amount of compression of how much more quickly we're expected to change. If you then complement that and take it to a human level, you're really talking about the average person having to make up to 5 times more decisions in the same period of time. Then you add to that the fact that about 90% of the world's data became accessible. And so all of a sudden, as a public leader, I'm like, okay, I've got to change faster than ever, I've got to make more decisions than ever, and gosh darn it, they got to be better than ever, right? Because I have all this information. And so, when I look at it, what I really do is sit back with the team and say, what's the relationship with knowledge we want to have? And so I actually would say it might be more than 40%, because what it really does is previously, our relationship with knowledge in government was about structure and control, right? Everything had to be perfectly structured, cleaned, and controlled. But the problem with that is that that's a fractional amount of our data that we have that relationship with. And so when I think about AI, what it allows us to do is to have a relationship with unstructured information, which quite frankly is a lot of our treasure, right? It's our after actions, it's our research, it's the things that we actually invest our treasure into to have. And so to me, not only is AI going to play a role, but if we embrace it and thinking about what is that relationship with knowledge. The last thing I think that is, at a personal level for me, really powerful about this tool is that, I don't know about other folks here, but I'm tired, right? Like, it just feels like there's more toil, often in the work of not only leadership, but everyone at every level. And if there's one thing that I've learned, and I'll end on this, it's that toil eats purpose faster than mission can replace it. And so when I think about what AI might allow us to do to have a relationship with knowledge at that speed and scale, but even more importantly, just to reduce the toil, right? The things that someone doesn't find fulfilling, I think that there's going to be a real trickle-down impact of retention, of greater sense of purpose that we can do if we approach this tool in the right way.
And I like the whole, would you say augmented intelligence?
Augmented versus artificial.
You should copyright that.
Done. Where's patent and trade? Oh, right there.
There you go. So Catherine, what's your take on that? Do you see it applying on the civilian side of the government as well? And I know your team has rolled out what's it called, the Workforce of the Future playbook. How does that tie into Gen AI?
So this may be my bias because our agency has personnel in it. However, I think generally Gen AI is really all about the people, which I think is a little bit of what Alexis was mentioning. And by that I mean both that as we think about applications of Gen AI, it's as important to think about how can we think about the pain points our customers or our employees or our leaders are feeling, and how can this be a tool to fix some of those pain points. And so that's one piece that I mean when I say Gen AI is all about the people. The other piece is, I'm broadly responsible for making change in my agency. That is what transformation is all about. And in order to make any kind of transformation happen, you have to think about the impacts on the people, the change management, the processes that need to change, and making sure that you have a workforce that's prepared for any and all of the above. And so I think that's the other piece that I mean when I say Gen AI is really all about the people. And to your question, Gaine, on the Workforce of the Future playbook, so OPM has been broadly a thought leader on what does the federal workforce need to look like in the future, and how do we make sure it is agile, it is engaged, and we have the right skills to bring the federal government into the future. And as we were putting together this playbook, which includes a series of, we've called them plays, of different things agencies can be doing to get talent in, to get talent to stay, to upskill the workforce, to think about data, we included a play about the integration of AI technology and recognition of how big of an impact that this will not only have on some of the HR processes, but the broader mission delivery of agencies, and the need to make sure that we have the skills that we need in our collective agencies.
That's great. And along those lines, let's stick with talent, right? David, the DHS has gone on a hiring spree. They're hiring tons of AI specialists across the board, right? Where are you with that initiative? And what are the opportunities these specialists are going to be focusing on?
Absolutely. All right. So for some context here, we're talking about the DHS AI Core. The Secretary announced on February 4th in Mountain View, California. We as a department, as a unified voice, are committed to bringing in AI talent to the department. What we are really doing differently is instead of essentially a group saying, we're going to go put out some postings and commit to putting postings on USA Jobs and just see what hits, and everybody essentially poaching for one another, we said, let's stop that craziness. This is too important to the department. It's too important to the success of the department. So we said, we're going to go out as one voice to industry, to the public sector, to the rest of the federal government, and we are going to work together to bring in experts. And once those experts are inside of the department, then it's a really fun, amazing work where we start to get to deploy them to components to solve a lot of the really high priority mission issues, cybersecurity, talking about border security, countering fentanyl, all of those types of things. So in 1 month, we have received over 2,000 applications to the DHS AI Core. I am personally having to interview everyone, and that was by design, but we actually, this week, have sent out our first tentative job offer and have our first tentative job offer accepted for the DHS AI Core.
So do we get to piggyback on this? Whatever you don't take, you kind of throw over?
Listen, you gotta talk to OPM here, because...
I know someone from OPM.
Okay, so...
Sharing is caring, right?
Yeah,
exactly. No, absolutely, right. So we designed a new PD called AI Technologist 2210, GS15, and we are trying to standardize that. And what we have found is that we have actually taken that original position description for AI, and we've actually been able to scale it up and scale it down to really help us after we're done hiring the general AI core. We can actually use it to fill a lot of other AI needs across the department.
Great.
Quickly though, in all seriousness on that, we were having a conversation before in the back, and one of the things that's been really interesting when we've started to look at our AI talent is, especially when you look at generative AI, yes, there's the role of the creation where the data scientists, right, or the engineer or others have a real role. But interestingly, as we've been kind of running some basic A/B tests, when we look at prompt engineering as a skill, what we're actually finding is that the engineer or the data scientist is not out of the gate the better prompt engineer than the PR person or the lawyer or things like that. So as you think about AI, are you thinking about when we get into, NLP or people who are actually good with words, or stories, and the importance that they may have in your AI cadre?
Yes.
Sorry, not to put you on the spot.
No,
this is totally
okay.
not by script.
Because they are the subject matter experts, right?
This is its own panel, its own thing. Yeah. So we are, I don't call myself an innovator. I say I find patterns and let's repeat patterns. So the U.S. Digital Service has an incredibly effective pattern, right? They are not just bringing folks in for their technical acumen. There's also the softer skills, project program management, product management, et cetera. So actually our PD is very broad in the sense that we recognize there is more than just computer vision, machine learning, robotics, generative AI, prompt engineering, or RAG, like it's a very broad skill set, but what brings them together is that sense of product management, of being able to bring that mission capability or mission gap together with technology.
Makes sense, absolutely. John, what's your take on that? I mean, as the USPTO is the protector of innovation and intellectual property, right? So obviously, with Gen AI in the mix, there's going to be a lot of gray areas, right? How do you kind of envision that panning out?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's interesting, right? When we call it the center of innovation and protector of innovation, that changes over time. Last year it will be a different thing. This year, right now, it's Gen AI. But as we move forward in that realm, it's important to focus back on to the people and the mission and demystifying AI, demystifying what Gen AI is, right? Where Gen AI is not there to replace people, it's not there to replace jobs, and and we see that in the uptick of patent submissions. We see that in the uptick of design patents. There is a lot of interest in improving everyday American citizens' lives across the board on there. So as part of how USPTO is approaching this, is one, we've released the draft guidance and initial guidance on what leveraging of AI can mean for patent submitters, design firms, and the end user on that front there, so that people don't have to keep guessing on that innovation front. On the workforce front, we're very focused on increasing that overall understanding on Gen AI and AI as a whole, where We have set aside an AI lab internally for our employees to be able to subscribe in, to test some of their day-to-day work within a confined space that is within our USPTO boundaries, but enables them to essentially demystify the artificial intelligence, the name, right? It's at the end of the day, Gen AI is a collection of very many different things on there. And as we're doing these, we want the employees, we want the people to showcase what they've discovered from using these things, what's worked for them, what's helped them on it. Ultimately, Gen AI and AI as a whole is going to transform how business is being done, and the employees and people have a big say in how they do that.
You know, I'd love, you mentioned labs. I'd love to discuss this with you, even if it's not today. Just understanding what metrics come out of some of those labs, right? We'd like, because obviously that will drive into continual improvement and things like that, right? So that's that. But anyways, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the executive order, the one October 2023. It's all about, safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. Agencies are looking, the scan has gone, right? Agencies are looking to fulfill the goals of the EO while waiting final guidance from OMB, right? In the meantime, what steps has your agency put in place to combat that?
Yeah, so one, we have provided initial guidance to employees and as well as to patent submitters on AI guidance for what can AI help with for people who are submitting patents. That guidance is at the USPTO webpage that people can look at, and there will be additional opportunities for the public to submit feedback into that. For within USPTO employees there, we focus on pillars of data, of the needs on, particularly on use cases. We really want to help people understand that it's ultimately the use cases that drives the adoption of Gen AI. At the end of the day, it's a tool. It's just like cloud yesterday was a tool, not always the most appropriate tool there. And one of the areas in the EO that has particularly talked about was trustworthy AI. And one of the pillars that we've been engaging and working with industry as well on is how do we establish and increase that trust, right? In terms of AI capabilities, their algorithms, what are things that, how do you know the algorithms being used and the data is being used is there to, towards the answers that staff are looking for, or that would otherwise pass the human test, right? So sometimes that gets lost in terms of I almost call it hysteria, right? You can go very easily one direction and trying to find the best model, the best algorithms, and the curated data. On the other hand, it's also important to identify use cases that are high impact but low impact in terms of failure. So if it fails, it's not going to take down your critical systems. So that way, people have an opportunity to test out these use cases without necessarily having to answer these large questions right off the bat, and let these guidances work its way forward, work with OMB and others as they produce these guidances forward. We want to make sure that we are in alignment with the EO, with the OMB guidances, and at the same time demystifying AI for employees.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? It doesn't have to be perfect for you to get benefits out of the LLMs.
Well, I think one thing that's really important is for us to always keep kind of a little bit of historical context, right? And so anytime that humanity is navigating a new technology, there is a period of time where we kind of have this figuring out stage. And if we go back, historically to the automobile, if you go back and you look at the news, there was, for 20 years, there were in essence two camps around the automobile. One was that it was a dangerous tool of the rich that was, killing people and dirty and going to take away, everything. And the other was that this was going to fundamentally, kind of change human existence. And the first thing I point out is that was a 20-year debate, right? So it's not unusual to be kind of in the public realm of AI becoming more a part of our daily life and to find ourselves in this conversation, right? Or looking at policy. But what I want to highlight is that from the period of the time the car was invented to the period of time that we established seatbelts as a regular occurrence was more than 60 years. And so every now and then, I think when it comes to these types of things, we also have to lean in and get ourselves a little bit of credit, right? For being, I mean, how short a time period has actually passed, and how intentional and how quick we are and how specific we are in trying to want to get it right? And if you look specifically, at something which is still a problem, when we think about bias, but it's everyone's kind of first example. And what I think is interesting about bias is the fact that, number one, bias is actually how we exercise our expertise and experience, right? But in the AI context, it's always taken negatively. But I think the second is that, AI is a learning tool. And so I think when I've seen teams be really, really effective, and actually Patent Office is a great example of it, they went in intending to learn, right? It wasn't a set it and forget it. It was what is the relationship with knowledge we want to have with this? What does that look like? And I think, as we embrace that, but also as we're quick to realize, again, in the example of bias, when that came up and when that started being a real issue that people realized there's a problem here, not only did the algorithms start to change, or we were more intentional about what we trained it with, but I don't know how many of you actually kind of noted this, but the camera lenses in your camera, which wasn't what people were talking about when they were concerned about bias, right? They were concerned about the algorithms or the wrong training data. But actually, the biggest difference was when the camera lenses in all of our iPhones or Androids changed to be able to say, like, we need to show a greater variety of skin tones, right? So that the training can be good. So I say that only because, I sometimes worry a little bit about the doom loop that we get in with this. And I think sometimes stepping back and being like, wow, where are we? Where can we at least recognize that we're being intentional, right? That we're trying to get it right, but do that in a way that doesn't stop, our relationship with this technology evolving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I could just build on that, I think the other thing is, from a transformation perspective, one of the things that I'm always thinking about is how much change can our agency take on at once, right? We at OPM, we have some big ambitions about how big and how far we want to go with our agency beyond Gen AI. And one of the things we're constantly thinking about is, is this too much change that we're trying to take on at any one point in time? And I think with Gen AI, there is a similar type of lens that I think organizations should be taking broadly. There may be some applications that you can very quickly scale enterprise-wide. For example, like things like the ChatGPTs of the world or something similar, where people are already, I think, mostly playing around with it in their free time. At least I know people in my household are. And then there might be other places, like the use cases that are identified, where you actually can't just use Gen AI as the solution. You have to actually think about the processes, like the way the business operates, the way customers interact with your agency. And so I do think that it's important for agencies to, in addition to some of the great lenses that you mentioned as well, is to think about, can we actually accept all this change at once? And how do we make sure that we're prepared for it so that we can still deliver on our mission as we are being innovative and using this new tool?
Absolutely. We don't have to boil the ocean, right?
Great consultant phase. Love it.
We don't have to boil the ocean, and we don't have to get everything perfect.
As a recovering consultant, I appreciate the usage of boiling the ocean, so thanks.
Just go live. I used to do delivery at one point, so, working with customers, it's like, okay, come on, let's just get in there. Yep. Let's show value.
Just boil the puddle, not the ocean.
It's neither here nor there. Anyways, let's talk about responsible AI, and I would like both your takes, right, David, and as well as Alexis. Alexis, on your end, as the only DoD representative on stage, what does responsible AI mean to you? And I want to see how it all fits in, right? You think about the DoD, you've got your unclass networks, you've got your class networks, you've got disconnected systems, you've got all that, and then you've got your LLMs, right? How is all that going to fit together? And then I know David, the responsible user group. I want to get to you in a second on that one. Okay, go ahead, Alexis.
Yeah, so I think, again, this is part of why we don't look. So AI is so many things, right? So one of the big problems is that it's a suitcase term. And the reality is AI is maybe an off-the-shelf, ready-to-go translation tool as much as it is a predict what the adversary is going to do, as much as it is a help, be a wingman, right, to some of our pilots and other things. So I think the first thing is to step back and to say, again, what is the relationship, with this knowledge or with this capability that we intend to have? And I use the word intend really purposefully, right? Because the AI is not magic, right? It is math, and it in essence does what we tell it to do with the information we tell it to do it with. And that means that all of the normal morals and ethics and intentionality that we have to exercise in any one of our mission areas is naturally extended to any tool that we use. And so I think, right now, it's really, again, what is that intentional relationship with knowledge? I think the other thing, that's really important is when we make technology decisions, a lot of times we look at those collectively as government as, well, I'm buying a capacity, right? Or a functionality or a capability. And I actually think we're entering an era where we actually have to be very careful about the commoditization of these things. Because what I mean by that is technology, if you think about it, we spend most our day interacting and actually manifesting our mission in technology. Absolutely. And so one of the things that we're really trying to pivot and think about is that means our technology choices are as much about a manifestation of our values and culture as they are any particular capability or capacity. So, I think at the end of what drives us every day, it's, will this make someone's life better? Will it make it easier? Is it appropriate? But I want to highlight the fact that as, again, we navigate a new tool, it's very normal to come out with new policy or new things like that. But, there isn't any new morality required here, Absolutely. Right? There isn't any new ethics. I already sign an ethics pledge every day. I already try to make good choices according to our mission. And so I think we have to be a little bit careful when we take a tool and we start saying that it needs a new set of values or a new set of ethics, because I'd like to be held to that same standard no matter what tool I'm using, where, across our mission.
Absolutely. Like that, technology is a manifestation of our culture.
Of our culture and our values, yeah.
That's something else we need to copyright, all right? Let's take note of that one. David, I promised you, let's go into responsible use group, right? It's
Yes.
about mitigating risks, assessments, all that good stuff. Can you expand upon that?
So just started off by just expanding upon what Alexis was saying, Department of Homeland Security specifically, I can't speak for other agencies, has been using AI for over a decade now. It's not a new thing. We have our authority to operate process. We have FISMA, FITARA, we have, privacy laws and regulations, privacy impact assessment. That stuff has been around for a long time. I think the real difference is we're being intentional about it now for AI, which is a really good thing, right? And so that's where we start talking about the responsible use group at DHS. So in April of last year, Secretary of Homeland Security signed off the memo for the creation of the AI task force. As part of that, the Officer for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, Shova Siva Prasad Wadia, was deemed a vice chair. I'm terrible with the vice versus co versus whatever else, but vice chair of the AI task force. And as part of that, she instituted what we call the responsible use group. Yep. Right. And so in the beginning, that group was a lot of forming, storming, and norming around the civil rights, civil liberties communities, sort of circulating draft policies, bringing in external stakeholders from academia and other organizations to really talk about how they're tackling the civil rights and civil liberties issues. And now with the announcement of the AI pilots at DHS, we've got 3 generative AI pilots that are mission focused. We're actually making that rug actionable to where members of that rug, the responsible use group, I've got to pick a better acronym, rug. Don't sweep it under the rug. So when you have the rug, it actually consists of more than just the civil rights individuals and officers from the components. It actually consists of technologists and some folks from the mission that are interested in civil rights, civil liberties. We actually use that group to define a pilot advisory group. So every single pilot that we have announced recently has a pilot advisory group with members from multiple components, all providing that third-party opinion based upon that individual use case. Nice. And so working with that group, along with the implementation of these pilots, which whatever model, deployment pattern, et cetera, the idea is this group is responsible for not just identifying sort of real-time individual with this use case, sort of CRCL concerns and mitigations and strategies, but actually looking at that use case at the big picture of DHS. For example, one of those use cases is around training, right? Using generative AI to mimic or imitate a trainer so that you can actually have a trainee go real live chatbot style and sort of be able to answer questions and get graded on that, right? So that's a pretty cool use case. That's not specific to an individual component. That training use case is actually applicable to more than just USCIS. In the asylum community they have there, there's a law enforcement impact of that. There's emergency management impact of that as well. Like there are multiple parts of DHS that can take that same core concept of leveraging generative AI to provide this feature and actually figure out if that is appropriate to implement or use that in other places in the mission. So it's just getting set up and formulated. We've identified all the individuals. We've actually have the U.S. Digital Service is helping us make sure we get this done right. And the idea is by the end of this, we're also going to be informed on sort of what is the future of the responsible use group, right? So how does this become bigger, ingrained into our culture at DHS to where as we start looking at new use cases, for example, language translation technologies and transcription technologies, like what are the ethical CRCL bias controls that we need to think about?
That's phenomenal. That initiative is phenomenal. I'm sure it will evolve over time. And obviously, it touches the mission, which is most important, right? And sticking with that theme of risk, and this could be Catherine, John, or maybe both, what are the major risks of Gen AI do you see in your agencies right now? And then how do we plan on addressing and mitigating them in the future? Who wants to take it?
So, yeah, I'll start off. So I think obviously there are a lot of risks that I'm sure many people in the audience and on the panel are well aware of around cybersecurity and data integrity and the technology itself. But I think I'll talk about one that is relevant to OPM. So OPM has a government-wide role in supporting the federal workforce. And I think that one of the risks that we are working to help mitigate is, again, to make sure that we get the right talent into government at the right places at the right time to be able to not just be hands-on keyboards developing the tech, but then to be using it. And I think one thing everyone on the panel has mentioned is that there are people that are working on all of the things that we've been talking about. The machines have not taken over yet, so there is a need for people to be involved, and that's where OPM has been a strategic partner with agencies in creating policies that can help agencies to more easily get that talent into government, helping to create guidance around flexibilities that allow for more easy hiring pathways. There's also some other innovations around pooled hiring, which is essentially, you were joking earlier, Alexis, about how can OPM help to use some of DHS's certifications. There are actually some mechanisms in place to allow for agencies to share those opportunities if done at the beginning. And so we're working on ways like that. And also one of our other big initiatives is getting more early career talent into government, which obviously there's not a one-to-one with early career talent and Gen AI, but having people that are coming in earlier in their career is one of the many things we can be doing to mitigate this risk. So I think that there is, to me, one of the big risks that we're trying to work on is all around that talent. And I would also say not just getting the talent in, but making sure the talent that's already in is upskilled appropriately, that our leaders are equipped with the right decision-making frameworks and enough of an understanding about the power of this technology that they can also ask the right questions and make the strategic decisions necessary about how they want to prioritize the different use cases that they're rolling out.
Makes sense. John?
Yeah, I'll add to that, and piggybacking off of what Catherine mentioned, focusing on people, right? So just two aspects that I'd like to delve into a little bit is one is the AI for technologists and AI for everyone. And when we're talking about AI for technologists, it is some of those hands-on keyboard people, some of those keyboard clickers on there, and how to implement AI as part of the new generation of applications, products being built on there. And when we're looking at that space, it's especially with more and more of systems moving towards a SaaS model, towards cloud, AI is bleeding into everyday work, whether employees and staff are ready for it or not. Yeah. More and more tools that are being used has AI built into it. When you start typing an email, AI starts helping you generate some words for you to choose and finish your language on there. So it goes back to increasing that general understanding of AI and Gen AI, that it's not there to take over people's jobs, is to help focus on how are these tools and help answer those questions. And also creating a forum on it, because at the end of the day, these tools need to help the employees, needs to help the staff to do that. And that goes into the AI for everyone, right? As you start using your everyday tools to do your work, whether it's emails or Teams or whatever chat tools that you're using on it, AI is going to be part of that conversation. Absolutely. On it. So it's really a multifaceted approach, going back to how do we get staff and new talent, upskilling, and recruiting new talent and retention of talent on there that is of interest. One of the things related to interest is there's more and more people joining the workforce that have specific interests in how to further AI opportunities, further specific opportunities. So as an agency, we also have a responsibility to enable and attract, retain those resources, and share the wealth of David and Catherine and everyone else to build out this AI core. Because at the end of the day, these resources are, we're not just competing amongst ourselves, we're competing with private sector. So bringing up that general level of understanding and interest makes it a job portable skill for employees and enables the mission forward further.
Well, one thing I'd love to follow and maybe Catherine's early point on transformation. I find a lot of times in government, what we tend to do is we just think that telling people to do differently is enough. And I think when I look at the best things that government's done, we take people on a journey that's not just do this differently, but here's how you might want to think differently. And more importantly, here's how you have an opportunity to feel differently, right? And I think part of what's really interesting about AI, to John's point on is the socialization, right? We have to recognize and accept that people have identity with the tools that they use, right? And a lot of them are quite invested. And so, I was talking with someone earlier that there are kind of 3 predictable phases, of technology. There's like ta-da, right? Which I think a lot of us felt like when ChatGPT came out, like ta-da, right? And there's like interesting like wonder and and there's emotions in that. And then the second one is actually uh-oh. Right? And so right now we're in this kind of like interesting ta-da, uh-oh stage, right? Of okay, and we want to be intentional, we want to think through, and we kind of slow down. And then there's like, aha, right? Now and the aha comes, it comes when you start to actually have an emotional connection to understand that this thing has a place in your identity. Absolutely. In your values, and that it's not a threat, and that it's an augmentation, for example. And so I think, as leaders who want to see the very best of government, part of what we've got to do is embrace the ta-da, right, the uh-oh, the aha, and recognize it's more critical for us to take people on that path than it is like, here's the technology, you'll use it, it'll be great, right? And so I just, and actually to that, much kudos to DHS for, I don't know if you want to call it out, but the recent, you talk about it, but DHS deserves lots of props for what David is going to share.
Yeah, so wrapping my little, first off, dead on, right? So the difference between generative AI and the technology we have in our pockets and showing the screen over, it's 10%. It's a 10% difference. It's still hardware, software. There's privacy risks across the board, cybersecurity. Like have good cyber hygiene. Like come on, like we've been worrying about that for decades now. That didn't come about because AI to figure out cyber hygiene was an important thing. So the Department of Homeland Security, we have a multiple-rung approach to generative AI. The first one was commercial generative AI. We knew it was going to take a very long time for us to figure out sort of how do we embed generative AI into mission systems, how do we trust it, what are the civil rights and civil liberties impact, bias, all of those types of things. We said we have this really kind of core exploratory opportunity we've never had before. Let's fix that. So we literally brought up ChatGPT and said, draft me a policy on how to use ChatGPT. And then we said, draft me a training on how to use, ChatGPT policy. And so it was several months. We worked with civil rights, civil liberties, privacy. We brought in the Office of Science and Technology, cybersecurity, and we formalized it and finalized it. So DHS now has a policy. We have training. We have supervisor guidance. We have worked out government-friendly terms and conditions with multiple companies. which is now available, dhs.gov/AI. If you were, federal department agency, you're more than welcome to copy, steal, whatever you want. Just scratch out my name and put your name on it. Totally fine.
I've already done that.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? No, that's fine. That was the point. And so that's the precursor to the second point. And that's about the cultural side of things. So we have trained over 3,000 DHS employees against this policy, its compliance, rules of the road, what to do, what not to do. And I will tell you that it is a cultural thing right now, and we get questions on both sides. Like, I get DHS employees, is it going to take our job? Like, how are you checking for bias? Like, how are you doing this? And then we have other people who are like, hey, can you get this tool as well? This is awesome. I love this. I want more of this. Like, it is all over the place. So I think the biggest threat is not addressing the cultural impact of generative AI and making sure that you are being supportive of your employees and finding a path for them to be safe with the technology, even if they're not ready to use it yet, right? So what is that relationship between a supervisor and employee? How do you communicate that? What's the training involved? How do you provide awareness without shoving it down their throat and making them use the tool? And we found that to be very effective.
Alexis, you were telling me backstage that you're an AO as well as a CIO, so you're authorizing official. And I know we're running short of time, but I'm going to call an audible and ask you this question.
Oh, jeez.
I think it's for the benefit of everyone, right? We've got ATOs in federal, right? We've got RMF process in the DoD. And I know, with just my experience with the DoD, we've finally come around to RMFing and authorizing solutions, SaaS solutions, cloud solutions. Now you add Gen AI into the mix, right? And you think about it, most enterprise solutions will have their LLMs separate from their technology stack. How's that ATO going to work out? How do people go live with this?
Yeah, I think the moral of the story is I expect to be very busy in the next couple of years. But I do think it's one of the great things, the reason I called out, Dave and the incredible work of DHS is that we have to be in learning mode, right? We have to have reciprocity. So I think, one of the first things is, myself and a lot of other AOs and Air Force and our AO leadership are talking about what does that look like, right? What does reciprocity, how do we shrink, the mountain of death? I'm not even going to call it the valley of death, right? Between, being able to hand off, amongst us. But this is going to be, an area where I hope people also have empathy for us, right? Because everything's figure-outable, but we're going to have to figure this out the same way that you all, and we are exposed to quite a lot of risk as we do that, right? And so, I don't think there's any clear answer. What I would say that we're trying to embrace and in short order is that right now, for a lot of people in this discovery, you have that kind of aha, like I want to use it, I want to do this, and then someone will become very committed to a tool, and then a lot of times the RMF process can feel a little bit like a punch in the face, right, or a punch in the gut of like, ugh. And I think our hope is in that spirit of learning and in that spirit of discovery to actually, we're exploring right now like security as a service, if you will, to say how do we take what is an end state conversation around security and maybe to the points that were raised on stage, bring it up into the discovery level so that people are able to make better choices earlier on. But stay tuned, AI will have a role in making that happen and be easier.
Awesome. All I got from that is we're building the plane as we're flying it, correct?
Which is typical government, right? Always. So yes, nothing new there, I'm sure.
All right, we've run short of time, but I'm going to do a quick question and hopefully I can hit all of you. Gartner predicts by 2026, that's 2 years from now, right? 80% of the enterprises are going to use AI in some form, whether it's through their LLMs, whether it's APIs to some sort of a Gen AI capability, whether it's AI-enabled applications. At the moment, it's less than 5% usage, right? They think it's going to hit 80% by 2026. Do you think that holds true in the government? And do you have any predictions for us?
It has to hold true because, again, we are in the business of knowledge.
Very nice.
And if we're going to put all the knowledge on the table and be as responsible public servants making data and knowledge-informed decisions, then I actually hope it exceeds 80% because the more knowledge we have, the better we can do our jobs.
That's amazing. Any predictions before we wrap up? Because
93%.
93%. Well, predictions on anything. It doesn't have to be just that.
Well, dang it. I just want to use my prediction.
This is being recorded, right? So I'm going to come back. We're going to meet up in 5 years and see how it holds up.
So I predict that 80% of the software we buy is going to have Gen AI in it, and whether they're ready or not, they're going to have Gen AI available And it's not a problem, but it is definitely forcing that cultural issue I spoke about before.
Yeah, absolutely. John?
Yeah, so definitely very high percentages on there. And with the shift towards SaaS, to David's point, it's without a doubt we're going to inherit Gen AI just from that aspect. How long it will take for us to build our own developed applications, that might take a little longer. But as that increases the general awareness and knowledge of AI, I think that the velocity is going to increase over time.
Increase over time, right? Absolutely. Catherine?
So I'm going to rely on my the technology experts on the panel for their prediction about what the technology might look like. I think maybe not a prediction as much as a path, is we've talked a lot about workforce and people and culture and change management. I do think there is a path, which is that the technology may have kept up or outpaced, but the organizations themselves are not able to fully use the capabilities that are possible within the tech if we haven't kept up with the skills, made strategic choices, and made sure that we bring, and I think, Alexis, you said it very well, like bringing people along on the journey so that we actually have the transformation that we're trying to see and not just really great tech without the actual uptake. So I think it's more of a path than a prediction, but I do think there's a lot of work that agencies need to be thinking about outside of the technology to make sure that we can actually see some of these numbers come into reality.
Awesome. Thank you all for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to share the stage with you. And let's enjoy the rest of Fed Forum.